Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of What a Fuster Cluck. I'm your host, Lolita Keys. And as always, please remember, if you have not already done so, to hit that like button, the share button, and the subscribe button. Most importantly, the subscribe button on either Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or all three, so that you can make sure you never miss an episode of this podcast and share this content with anyone you think would benefit from it or deserves to be part of the conversation. I am super fired up this week, as usual, because in my daily podcast listening, there were a few themes that came together for me this week that really resonated and gave me the content that I want to talk about today. So let's jump right into it. The last several episodes I've done have focused on a theme, the theme of the death of the American family, the fact that our birth rate is declining and why we should all be concerned about that, the differences between boys and girls and how modern feminism totally outpaced and left boys behind. All of these things coming together, and it hit me the impact starting as early as preschool and the education system in this country, and how we have gotten to this point in 2026. Over the last 17 years, an estimated 11.8 million children were never born. Not because women couldn't have them, it's because they chose not to. And also because the childbearing age has gone up. Women are having babies later in life, and because of this, they are not having as many babies. Add to this the boy and male crisis in this country, where they're essentially dying by suicide at 4 times the rate of girls and make up 80% of all suicide deaths in this country. So before we talk about the school bells and the bell curves and what I'll explain as the GEB, I want you to sit with those numbers, because everything we're talking about today kind of leads back to those statistics. I am not saying that I want boys and girls to have equal suicidal outcomes. I don't want anybody to be committing suicide, but the numbers are striking. And I always like to give you at least some details or some context, some statistical evidence of what seems to be going on in this country. I want to start out with the education system and how the school bell was never for you. There is a historical context that's associated with this and some conspiracy theories that have been floating around for years about the Rockefellers essentially creating the school system, or what we know as the school system today. Some of this is fact, some of it is fiction. So let me give you some of the research, the facts on the research that I have done. There's something called the Prussian military model, where schools were designed to produce obedient soldiers, not thinkers, not critical thinkers. Bell schedules, rows of desks, age-based grouping, none of this was architected around how children actually learn or develop. It was designed to make children compliant. A gentleman named Horace Mann brought this model to America in the year 1843 after studying it in Germany. The compliance infrastructure is already baked in well before the Rockefellers even touched the education system. So I want you to think about the fact that this goes well beyond 100 years ago. It goes well beyond the Rockefellers, well before them, I should say. But if you do the research on the Prussian military model, I think you will find that obviously we still seem to be we still seem to be operating off of this same model even today. And when you hear why this model was designed, I think it becomes glaringly obvious how it is not in the best interest of our children. More to come on that. The Rockefellers enter the picture in the early 1900s, creating the General Education Board, what you previously heard me refer to as the GEB. This was founded in the year 1902-1903 and deployed about $129 million, roughly $4.3 billion in today's money, to fund schools and teacher training across the nation. And in their 1906 mission statement, this is the part that freaks me out the most. It actually says, in our dreams, people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. This is where the conspiracy theories start to stem from, and rightly so, because the way I read this, the way it seems to be written, is they are essentially admitting that they wanted to ensure that the public school systems were providing a place to keep children docile and keep them in a state where they are easily molded. Documented academic research confirms the GEB's vocational tracking agenda. And poor kids were essentially streamed into manual labor tracks before they ever had a chance to discover what they were actually capable of. This was never about getting kids to follow their hopes and dreams. It was about steering them in the direction that big money wanted them to go in all the way back in the early 1900s. This is not conspiracy. This seems to be the truth. The credibility moment here is the famous quote that came out, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. This appears to be fabricated. This was traced back to a 2006 conspiracy documentary where they were basically saying that Rockefeller said that quote, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. But this appears to not be true, but I do want to go back again to the quote that I just read you, or I'm sorry, the mission statement that they provided. In our dreams, people yield themselves with perfect docility, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, to our molding hands. I think the important thing here is that the structure of the American school day, the bells, the rows, the age-based groupings, as if all children of a certain age are exactly the same, the standardized testing, all of this was designed for an industrial economy that no longer exists by the same people whose interests were not your child's flourishing, but again, it was in their ability to keep them docile and to drive them in the direction that they wanted to go. And yet we have continued to inherit this wholesale. Why does this bother me? Why is this something that I wanted to talk about? Well, I have two children of my own who happen to be boys. And one of the things that frustrates me so much is my children constantly say that they feel that their teachers, that their school caregivers, counselors, etc., that they favor girls to boys. Now, I understand there's an exception to every rule, but more likely than not, boys are less likely to sit still. They are less likely to have their attention held, and they are less likely to have the same innate kind of wants and desires as girls. Now, again, there's exceptions to every rules, but this is statistically true. And if you are out there and you're a boy mom or you have a rambunctious girl on your hands, you know that it almost comes across in a way like they're trying to tell you there's something wrong with your kid. He or she cannot sit still. Well, guess what? They aren't meant to sit still. I don't know how many more times we have to say this. And it's so hard as a parent when I feel like in one sense I have to discipline my child if they get in trouble at school for things like not sitting still or being fidgety. And in another sense, I realize like this is insane. This is insane that in 2026, over 100 years after the Rockefeller getting involved in education, and definitely well over 100 years since this Prussian model got introduced into the United States, we are still operating off of this same model. When will we learn? Unfortunately, as long as government controls these types of institutions, I don't think that there will be any change. This is why oftentimes if you leave it to private corporations, they will oftentimes solve for this, because we can see that schools are popping up more and more that really tailor to children's strengths, their schedules, their ability to retain their attention based on, are they more hyperactive? Are they more chill? Whatever. But unfortunately, these schools come with a cost, and it is not included in your taxpayer dollars typically. But I do need to do more research, and I do want to be able to provide you guys with a follow-up episode of schools in the country, or even a resource. Perhaps there's a website out there that can direct parents on where to go who are looking for alternative education sources outside of the public school system, and even outside of more traditional private schools who seem to follow this same Prussian type schooling. but rather the ones that encourage your child's creativity to come out. Listen, with everything that's happening in AI, with the fact that we have outsourced so much of our industry in this country, our factory jobs and things like that, with the fact that robots and technology are taking over everywhere, why are we still continuing to go along with this model? Why is more not happening? And maybe this will be one of the hills that I die on when I have the time and my kids are a little bit more grown up to kind of get out there and be an advocate for changes in the school system. But it's a lot of food for thought, and it's so frustrating as a parent or even a grandparent, anybody who's raised kids or is actively involved in children's lives. Maybe you're a teacher, but you don't have kids yet or you don't want them. All of these things are just I just want us to be more aware of them so that we can all start having more of a voice and getting more involved. And sometimes it's difficult to understand where and how we do that. But I want to move on from this and get into the next segment of this episode, which is the lie of the average child. This is very, again, emotionally charging for me. So, age based grouping assumes all 7-year-olds are the same. And we know that they are not. A child who reads at a 10th grade level and struggles with math is treated as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be understood. The standardization model doesn't just fail academically, it pathologizes normal human variation. Kids who don't fit the mold, they get labeled, they get medicated, or quietly demoralized into believing something is wrong with them when nothing is wrong with them. They just are, they're just kids. They're just kids. And they were never meant to be stuck in a school system or in a childcare system for 8, 10, 12 hours a day in some instances if you're a working parent. It's awful, you guys. And we got here over time via a slow drip. And I cannot recommend enough that you read the book Occult Feminism by Rachel Wilson and you read the book Notes on Being a Man by Scott Galloway. I've done 2 episodes on both of these people and the things that I learned from them. And the more we wake up to these things in my kids' generation, there's probably not going to be any change here, but hopefully in their kids' generation, because today parents are listening to this message and waking up, then maybe in the future something can be done and we can get to a different education style so that kids don't feel so demoralized and so that we aren't medicating kids from such a young age that we are absolutely crushing their little like human spirits. When in your adult life are you ever evaluated exclusively against people born in the same calendar year as you? You're not. But as a child, this is the world that we are living in. This is the country that we are living in. The message that children absorb over 12 years of this insane system is you either conform or you fail. The message is not discover who you are and build on it. It's conform or it's fail. Remember the episode I did recently on homeschooling and the homeschooling movement? Again, this is just yet another indicator that families are opting out. It's not that we're anti-education. We want our kids to learn. We understand the value of math and reading and social studies and all of these things and science. We're all pro-child. It's just that the data is increasingly backing these alternative education models for a reason. And it's really scary when you think about the fact that again, the evidence totally points in the direction of basically like raising up little slave soldiers. And we have all been a part of that system. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't had a summer off since I can remember because I got my first paid job at the age of 14 when I was immediately able to get working papers. And before that, I babysat. But it never leaves you that feeling of summer vacation, because you just feel like, oh my God, I'm free. And there's a reason for that. There is a reason for that because you had already lived 180 days in this relentlessly structured environment. And I'm a big proponent of kids needing structure, but this is like next level, y'all. We are so corporate. We are such a capitalist society. And I'm a fan of capitalism. I'm a fan of what's called conscious capitalism, which I think was coined by the guy who opened Whole Foods. I'm a fan of conscious capitalism, but we are just living at a level of corruption that is just unprecedented. And it really is unfortunate because our society has just accepted this as the norm. And again, We just really need to pivot. We were handed a system built for factory floors and told it was designed for human potential. But a century later, we are watching the downstream consequences in real time in our children, in our families, and in the numbers that I gave you when we first opened up this episode. The next segment I want to talk about is what I call, and what many call, the NGO industrial complex. So the problem here is the actual product. And this gets into more of the broader machine of what's happening out there. So here's something worth asking. NGOs don't get funded to solve problems. They get funded to manage them because when the problem disappears, so does the money. So what's the incentive structure actually rewarding? How many NGOs do you know of that have actually opened up and then solved the problem? And once they solved the problem, they instituted the process for the solution, and poof, it was gone. I mean, it never happens. It almost never happens. I would love to hear from you as to whether or not there actually is one. And so what happens is these become another greed trap where money gets funneled through these things, problems never get solved, and it's just like the pharmaceutical industrial complex. It's just like the medical industrial complex, the insurance industrial complex, which sounds so cliche to say that, but it is true. A lot of these systems are meant to keep you in a state of sickness so that you remain on the drug in all of perpetuity. You never understand what the root cause is. You never get to the root cause. You don't make the lifestyle changes that could really help you out because we're a docile society. And where does this come from? It comes from the Prussian school model. Let's see. What else? Okay. There's a pattern worth questioning. Not a proven coordinated conspiracy theory, but the pattern does seem to be real. And I want you guys to think critically about this, which is the funding question. Who is writing the checks that fund these NGOs? And what outcomes do they benefit from? I want you guys to follow the money because I don't want this to come across as an accusation, but honestly, as a discipline. There have been plenty of cases that show that Russia has funded many of our NGOs, that China has funded many of our NGOs. And what do these folks have in common? They're essentially our enemy, if you will. So the parallel to education is direct here. We have standardized systems that sorted children into compliance tracks, also created generations that are easier to sell to. They're easier to manage, and they're less likely to build the kind of rooted, self-sufficient communities that don't need institutional intermediaries. I'm not telling you this is a coordinated plan, but I'm telling you that the incentives line up in a way that should make all of us ask deeper, harder questions. Here's another segment that I want to get into that again just hits me so hard. We have replaced family with essentially this. Let's come back to the numbers. 11.8 estimated 11.8 million missing births. And the boys who are dying, they're dying silently. These are not just statistics. These are the cost of something. The question is, what? What are these the cost of? When we don't have strong communities, when we don't have strong faith systems, when we don't have strong family units, everything starts to fall apart. And we are seeing this in real time. If something's not working out in your life, you just get rid of it. You just get rid of it. We hear trendy cliche words like setting boundaries, right? Now, I agree in many ways. We do need to set boundaries in our life. But one thing that I notice that we kind of use when we use that word sort of as a crutch for quitting on something. And I mean, just look at our divorce statistics in this country. I believe that we all deserve to be happy. I really do. But I also believe that anything of value is worth fighting for. If you are being abused, neglected, and you have really just tried everything and you're getting nowhere and you want to get a divorce, then by all means, please do. Or you want to cut people out of your life, by all means, please do. But I would ask you to consider a few things first. We are learning more and more these days about how failure should be embraced because it's only through failure that you're typically taking risks that can often lead you to like glorious times in your life. And it's also through failure where we learn some of life's biggest lessons. So when you become totally risk averse, this is a subset of helicopter parenting. When you become totally risk averse, you are actually robbing yourself of the joy of the learning experience that comes after you fail at something. So I guess where am I going with this is just that I I feel like I grew up in a pretty tumultuous household. There was a lot of love, but there was also a lot of chaos, a lot of chaos. And I really believe and have said before that it is all the love and the family ties that kept me from being an absolute psychopath as an adult or a degenerate as a child. And I am just so thankful for the family that I had growing up, the memories that we made growing up, because it's true. There's some unwritten thing that's programmed deep in our DNA amongst our family. We are literally connected by our genes, our very being. And I think something about that just spiritually, innately, scientifically just keeps us connected. And when we quit on the people closest to us, when we get a divorce just because we feel like it, because our husband didn't like, I don't know, tell us we were pretty enough or, have enough sex with us or whatever the case is. And I'm not saying that maybe those aren't valid reasons to get a divorce. What I'm saying is, when is enough enough? And when are you just a quitter? And when you sit back and you ask yourself that question and you really are honest with yourself, I wonder what will come up for a lot of people. I think the moment you get married and have children, your children should always be worth fighting for. And I don't care what anybody says. Yes, there are families out there that are happy families and are mixed families with step parents. It's in my own family, right? I can attest to it even in my own family. But then there's a whole humongous subset of kids out there that are truly screwed up after their parents divorce and their parents like drag them into their problems. And I don't know. I just wonder how many of those people really put in the work, like really put in the work to strengthen their marriage before they gave up on it. And as I said, I think if the divorce rate is now over 50%, I would like to think that of that 50% or over 50%, 50% of those cases could have done better if they just worked harder and they really just got lazy. And that's what it boils down to. But our society has made it so easy to quit. We have made it so easy to quit that this is what people are going to do because human beings will tend to take the easier path versus the harder one. What else is have we replaced families with, right? Let's go back to the community argument. So we can see that our communities are literally hollowing out. We are all working so hard. We don't have time for community anymore. The birth rate collapse isn't just an economic anxiety. It reflects something deeper. People don't feel they have the foundation to bring a child into the world. I mean, they literally don't. They feel like they have no money. Inflation is killing everyone. They have no community. They have no village. They have no extended family to help them out. They have no cultural transmission of the why behind it. What seems to be filling this void? Again, I mean, the state stepped in. Corporations stepped in. The algorithm on your social media feed stepped in. These are not neutral or even natural replacements. These things all have interest. The state has an interest. The algorithm on your phone has an interest. It's called the attention economy for a reason. I mean, think about that. And basically, your family flourishing is not among one of their top priorities. In fact, they want to keep you, it sounds so cliche, but they want to keep you a slave. This is my opinion, but it's worth me owning this. I feel like it's a defensible one. I feel like all of the evidence points in this direction. And here's the other thing, the just block them culture. When somebody pisses you off, you block them. You want to cut off a family member because, all of a sudden like they pissed you off like one time. Okay. I mean, at least before you go cutting people out of your life, please make sure that there's a track record and think of the blast radius of kind of what that means, what that does, right? When quitting on the people that you love gets rebranded as self-care, you don't learn by repairing, you learn by leaving. You learn that repair by staying and working through it isn't a thing. You don't have the capacity for it. You don't have the capacity for repair, you don't have the capacity for forgiveness, you don't have the capacity for staying. All of this is kind of like built into the family structure. When the family breaks, so does the training ground for everything that makes society function. I truly believe that family is the foundation. Family is the foundation. Now let's dive into the male mental health crisis that I keep citing. This is like the canary in all of this. Boys are being diagnosed with depression at the same rate as girls, but they are dying from suicide at 4 times the rate. That gap between reported struggle and actual death, that's the silence right there. And the silence is what happens when you raise a generation of boys with no roots, no rites of passage, no community of men to model how to carry hard things forward. Like we're raising a bunch of wussies. And it's so obvious. We can't, our whole coping strategy is like rooted in medicine now. It's like, what pill can make me feel better faster? When it's like, what's causing all of this? What's at the root of all of this? It's the lack of support. It's the lack of time. It's the constant running around and working and, the endless hours and nobody stopping to smell the roses, as corny as that sounds. That is one of the things that's happening. And again, boys are lacking. They are so sorely lacking the mentorship that they need to kind of get their shit together and re-assimilate as the masculine force in our society and balance that with the feminine energy and everybody kind of level up together rather than leaving one sex behind simply to try to uplift the other. I'm so passionate about this. I really hope that that's coming through. So the data on the birth rates, the loneliness in our society, the male suicide, all of this isn't just sad. It's diagnostic. It tells you what happens when the connective tissue of civilization, family, tradition, community, the transmission of values from one generation to the next, when it gets replaced with systems that were never designed for your flourishing. All right, let's close this one out. And again, I really hope you can feel the passion in my voice. My purpose behind this podcast is to point out, the Fuster Cluck of it all, the Fuster Cluck of what is happening. If you guys are like me and you listen to a lot of the same podcasts as me, which I listen to just such a wide array of podcasts, it's often how I stumble upon some of this information. But if you do, or if you're paying attention at all, we are in an AI race right now. We really are. And I always think it's funny the way that movies tend to sort of predict to some degree of accuracy what the future will actually look like. And I cannot help but to think about movies like The Matrix and how ultimately the more connected we get, the more integrated we get with technology, the less human we become. I want to tell you guys about an app that a friend told me about recently. It's called Screen Zen. First, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. We need stuff like this in our lives, but we do. So Screen Zen is something that you can program to kind of help call you out or put boundaries. There's that word, boundaries. Put boundaries on your social media usage, on your, technology usage, and give you some of your life back. Honestly, how crazy is that? To give you some of your life back, because we are all, guys, this is it. This is it. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is the life that you get. You get one life and you're living in it right now. So just think about that when you're getting sucked into just sitting there on your phone, just aimlessly scrolling. Download that app, give it a whirl, and give yourself back some time for your actual life, to spend more time with your family, to spend more time with your friends. Find what brings you joy. I freaking love doing this podcast. I'm making no money off of this podcast. I don't know if I ever will, but I do know this. It's summertime. The kids are in a summer camp. As you guys know, I'm a full-time mama. I've got a full-time job and I've got my full-time kids, right? So it's difficult to balance both. The struggle happens every day because one ultimately does have to take priority over the other, depending on the day of the week. But I have a full time job and I have two children and a husband and family and friends. And people always ask me, how the hell do you find time to do this podcast? I do it because I love it. I love doing this podcast, it is my thing. And I really hope that comes through. And I hope you're learning something from it and you're gaining something from it and you're sharing the message with other people who you think might, because that's what it's all about. It's about the reciprocity. It's about serving other people, even if it's just with information or a laugh or an escape from whatever it is that you've got going on in your life. This is my golf. Okay, some people like to golf. I love to podcast. It's just what I love to do. And I hope with each passing podcast, I get better and better. And like last week, I had to miss a drop because the kids were sick and everything was just crazy. And I couldn't find the time to record it. And that genuinely bothered me. I love this podcast so much. I actually stress myself out when I can't drop an episode on time. So just know that if you see that I haven't dropped an episode, that's why, because life has just hit me. But I'm not going to quit on this. I'm going to come back to this. So let's close this episode out. All right. I want to acknowledge that all of my listeners are cut from different cloths. Some of you might be conservative. Some of you might be progressive. Some of you might be more traditional. There's no reason to even label yourself when it comes to this conversation. I want to like bring together what crosses all ideologies, all different types of people out there. And that's that nobody chose the algorithm over the dinner table. Nobody signed up for a nation where 11.8 estimated million children didn't get born. And the boys who are here dying in silence. We were nudged here slowly over a century through systems that were designed. And I mean that word carefully, and I mean that word literally. Systems that were designed, not for your child's flourishing, but for your child's compliance, for your compliance, because you likely came out of this same system. Again, going back to that app I told you to download, reclaim your intentionality. Reclaim your intentionality, whether that means homeschooling, protecting family dinner time, refusing to let a social media feed replace the wisdom of your grandmother. The act of resistance is the same. You choose what you want to pass down. No one can automate that. No one can standardize that. And no bell schedule can replace that. I want you to think about what is the one thing your family did, a tradition, a ritual, a value that you've let slip. And what would it need to take to get it back? Think about that. Think of one family tradition that you can bring back, one ritual you can bring back. It's some of my fondest memories is the traditions of my childhood that one of my favorites, I'll give you mine. I asked you to think about yours. I'll give you mine. It's Christmas. No matter the chaos in our lives, Christmas was always special. It always felt special. Even when we didn't have a lot, it always felt special. The house felt festive and cozy and safe and warm. I loved being with family, the food, the laughter, everybody just kind of like nobody typically had to work. Everybody just kind of felt relaxed and it was fun. And that's like one of my favorite. Of course, there's many others that I could name, but that's the one that lands the most with me. And so let me get the name of that app again. Okay, it's Screen Zen. Download that app. Take back your time. Figure out, ask yourself, what matters to me? What are the things that are important to me? Think about like what new hobby you could pick up, what thing you can do that gets you off of your technology and back with yourself or your family, because a stronger, happier you equals a better person that's going to show up for your family, for your job, whatever it is. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. Again, remember, like, share, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode. I really try my hardest to go through the Fuster Cluck of it all, but to try to leave you with a positive message, some takeaway that you can do, that you can incorporate into your life. So, with that, thank you for listening to another episode of What a Fuster Cluck. And until next time, bye, everybody.